You know, I never thought I'd be the guy suing his own neighbors. I'm the kind of guy who waves when you drive by, the guy who lends you his lawnmower and doesn't ask for it back until fall. I like peace. I like quiet. But life has a funny way of testing your limits, and sometimes the test comes in the form of a certified letter from a woman named Brenda who thinks she owns the ground you walk on. My name is Mark, and this is the story of how I accidentally became the landlord of 20 luxury patios, and how I forced an entire homeowners association to their knees, not with a weapon, but with a property deed and a smile. It started about 3 years ago. My wife, Elena, and I had been scraping pennies together since we got married, living in a cramped apartment that smelled like other people's cooking, dreaming of the day we could buy a forever home. We found it in Silver Creek Meadows. It was perfect. A big colonial with shutters that didn't hang crooked, a yard big enough for a dog we didn't have yet, and schools that actually had funding. The price was steep, stretching us to the absolute limit of our budget, but we signed the papers with shaking hands and tears in our eyes. We thought we were buying a sanctuary. What we didn't realize was that we were buying a ticket to a dictatorship run by the Silver Creek HOA. The queen of this little kingdom was Brenda. You know Brenda. Even if you've never met her, you know her. She's the retired vice principal who treats the neighborhood like a detention hall. She drove a pristine beige sedan, wore floral blazers that looked like upholstery, and had a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It just kind of bared her teeth at you. For the first 6 months, we kept our heads down. We mowed on Saturdays. We kept the trash cans hidden. We played the game. But Brenda needed conflict like a fire needs oxygen. It started with the warnings. A citation because our porch light was too warm, a shade of yellow. A fine because a delivery driver parked with one tire on the grass for 3 minutes. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'd come home from a 10-hour shift to find Elena crying at the kitchen table because Brenda had stopped by to chat about the symmetry of our flower pots. We just have to try harder, Elena would say, wiping her eyes. We can't afford to move, Mark. We just have to make her happy. I hated it. I hated walking on eggshells in my own driveway. But I loved my wife, so I swallowed my pride and painted the mailbox the exact shade of midnight onyx Brenda demanded. Then came the Saturday morning that changed everything. I was drinking coffee, staring out the back window at the empty lot behind our house. It was a wooded strip of land, maybe 50 yards deep, that acted as a buffer between our street and the next development over. I loved that view. It was the only wild thing left in the suburbs. I heard the mail slot clack. I walked to the front door and picked up a thick, creamy envelope with the Silver Creek crest embossed in gold foil. My stomach did that little flip it always did when the HOA made contact. I opened it. I read the first paragraph. Then I read it again. And then I think I stopped breathing for a solid 10 seconds. Elena, I yelled, my voice cracking. Get in here. She ran in, looking terrified. What? Is it a fine? No, I said, shaking the paper. It's worse. They're taking the yard. The letter was titled Notice of Community Expansion and Improvement. It detailed a plan, already approved by the board, of course, to build a new row of garden villas on the empty lot behind us. That was fine. I didn't own the empty lot. But then came the diagram. The blueprints showed the new houses backing right up to our property line. And not just backing up. The concrete patios for these 20 new units were drawn extending 30 feet past the easement line. 30 feet into my backyard. They can't do that, Elena whispered, tracing the line with her finger. That's where we were going to put the swing set. It's a mistake, I said, grabbing my phone. It has to be a typo. I'm calling Brenda. I dialed the number she had plastered on every newsletter. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless and annoyed, like I had interrupted her while she was busy saving the world. Brenda, it's Mark from 402, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I just got this letter about the garden villas. There's a problem with the map. It shows the construction crossing onto my property. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. Oh, Mark, she said, her voice dripping with that fake, syrupy sweetness she used when she was explaining things to idiots. There's no mistake. We had the surveyors out last month. Didn't you see them? The association actually owns that strip. Your deed was imprecise. We're just reclaiming community land to increase property values for everyone. You should be thanking us. I felt the blood drain from my face and then rush back in, hot and angry. Reclaiming? I stammered. Brenda, I have a mortgage that says I pay taxes on that land. I mow that land. You can't just redraw a map and take it. The board has voted, Mark. She snapped, the sweetness vanishing. The project breaks ground in 3 months. I suggest you move any personal items, grills, lawn chairs, before the excavators arrive. We wouldn't want your things to get damaged on HOA property. She hung up. I stood there, listening to the dial tone, realizing that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a land grab, a sanctioned, bureaucratic theft. What did she say? Elena asked, her eyes wide. She said it's a done deal. I said, tossing the phone onto the couch. She said they're coming. Most people, when faced with an HOA, just roll over. It's easier. You pay the fine, you move the shed, you apologize. But this was my dirt. This was the dirt I worked 60 hours a week to pay for. We fight, I told Elena. We fight this. The next few weeks were a blur of stress and caffeine. We dug out our closing documents. I pulled the county records. Everything I found confirmed what I knew. The property line was exactly where the fence line was. I owned that 30 feet. But Brenda had her surveyor, a guy the HOA paid, who miraculously found that the original plot lines from 1995 were slightly skewed in the HOA's favor. I tried to rally the neighbors. About 10 of us were affected. A whole row of houses was about to lose their backyards. I went door to door. Tom, I said to my next-door neighbor, a guy who usually had a spine, you see this? They're taking your fire pit. Tom just shrugged, looking defeated. Mark, you know how Brenda is. She's got the lawyers on retainer. If we fight, she'll raise the dues. She'll fine us for breathing wrong. It's not worth the stress. I'm just going to take the settlement. Settlement? I asked. Yeah, they offered me $5,000 for the inconvenience. $5,000. For a third of an acre of prime suburban land. It was insulting. It was robbery. But Tom folded. And so did the Millers. And the Garcias. One by one, the neighborhood capitulated to the Queen. I was the only one left standing. I hired a lawyer. His name was Robert, a real estate shark who looked like he slept in his suit and ate litigation for breakfast. I put down a retainer that wiped out our vacation fund, but I didn't care. Look, Robert said, reviewing my deed. You're right. They're wrong. It's black and white. But HOAs operate on intimidation. They think they can outspend you. We need to file an injunction to stop the construction. We filed the injunction. Brenda went nuclear. Suddenly, I was public enemy number 1. I got fines daily. Grass too long. Grass too short. Mailbox dusty. Oil stain on driveway. There was no oil. She was trying to bleed me dry, so I dropped the lawsuit. She called a mandatory board meeting to discuss the obstructionist behavior of certain residents. Elena and I showed up. We walked into the community center, holding hands, feeling like we were walking into a lion's den. Brenda sat at the head of the table, flanked by her yes-men. She looked at me with pure venom. Mr. Johnson, she said, tapping her pen, you are costing this community money. You are delaying a project that will beautify this neighborhood. Why are you being so selfish? Selfish? I stood up. I bought a piece of land. I pay for it. You want to build on it. That's not selfish, Brenda. That's theft. It is not your land, she shouted, losing her composure. The new survey is definitive. We offered you $5,000, which is generous. Take it, or we will sue you for legal fees when we win. I'll see you in court, I said. And we did. 6 months. That's how long it took. 6 months of depositions, surveys, counter-surveys, and legal bills that made me nauseous. The construction on the other houses started. I watched from my window as bulldozers tore up Tom's backyard. I watched them pour concrete on the Miller's lawn. They left my yard alone because of the injunction, but they built right up to the line on both sides. It looked like a smile with a missing tooth. Finally, the day of the ruling came. I sat in the courtroom, my leg bouncing nervously. Brenda was there, looking smug, whispering to the expensive HOA lawyers. The judge, a stern woman with glasses on the end of her nose, shuffled the papers. She looked at the HOA lawyer. She looked at Robert. It is the finding of this court, she began, and the room went silent, that the 1995 plat maps are the governing documents for this subdivision. The plaintiff, Mr. Mark Johnson, holds the valid deed to the property in question. She looked over her glasses at Brenda. The HOA's new survey appears to be based on wishful thinking, rather than legal precedent. The injunction is permanent. The land belongs to Mr. Johnson. The HOA is ordered to pay all legal fees for the plaintiff. I slumped in my chair. Elena squeezed my hand so hard I thought she'd break my fingers. We won. Brenda stormed out of the courtroom, her heels clicking like angry gunshots. I thought that was it. I thought we'd go back to normal. But then, the HOA made a fatal error. A mistake so arrogant, so stupid, that it turned a victory into a jackpot. See, while the lawsuit was happening, the developers didn't stop. They were on a tight schedule. They assumed the HOA would win. They assumed they could bully me into selling eventually. So, they kept building. They built the houses behind my lot. And, in a display of breathtaking incompetence, they poured the concrete patios. 20 of them. 10 on Tom's land. 10 on the Miller's land. And, because the construction crew was working off the new map, not the legal one, they poured the edges of those 20 patios across the line. Not onto my land, not yet. But the drainage systems? The retaining walls? The structural supports for the entire row of new houses? They were on my dirt. I received a letter a week after the trial. It wasn't a fine. It was a request. Dear Mr. Johnson, in light of the recent ruling, we find that certain structural elements of the new garden villas inadvertently encroach upon your property line. We request a meeting to discuss a retrospective easement. I showed it to Robert. He started laughing. He laughed for a full minute. Mark, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. Do you know what this means? They want to buy a strip of land. No, Robert said, grinning like a wolf. It means you own them. Own what? In this state, Robert explained, if someone builds a permanent structure on your land without your permission and you win the boundary dispute, the structure becomes a fixture of your land. You don't just own the dirt, Mark. You own the retaining walls. You own the drainage. And without those retaining walls, those 20 new million-dollar villas slide into the creek. He leaned back. They can't get a certificate of occupancy. They can't sell a single unit. You are holding $20 million of real estate hostage. I felt a smile spread across my face. A slow, cold smile. So what do we do? We have a meeting, Robert said. We met at the HOA office. Brenda was there, looking pale. The developer was there, a guy named Rick who looked like he wanted to murder Brenda with his bare hands. We sat down. Silence hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Johnson, Rick the developer started, his voice tight. We have a bit of a situation. We need an easement for the retaining wall. It's about 5 feet of your property. We're prepared to offer you the standard rate. $15,000. I looked at Robert. Robert looked at his fingernails. No, I said. Brenda slammed her hand on the table. You have to. Those houses are finished. We have buyers waiting to move in next week. That sounds like a you problem, Brenda, I said. You built on my land. After I told you not to. After a judge told you it was mine. We can eminent domain you, she shrieked. No, you can't, Robert said calmly. You're a private corporation, not the government. And you acted in bad faith. The judge already ruled on that. Rick put a hand on Brenda's arm to silence her. He looked at me, sweating. Okay. What do you want? 50,000. I leaned forward. I thought about the stress. I thought about Elena crying at the kitchen table. I thought about the fines, the letters, the arrogance. I want $500,000, I said. Brenda choked. That's extortion. No, I said. That's the price of the land. Plus the price of the retaining wall you built on it. Plus the price of the drainage system. Or, I can just order you to remove it. I let that hang there. If I order you to remove the encroaching structures, I continued, you have to tear down the retaining wall. If you tear down the wall, the foundations of all 20 houses fail. You'll have to demolish 20 brand new homes. What's that going to cost you, Rick? 5 million. 10. Rick did the math. I saw his eyes widen. He knew I had him. He turned to Brenda. The look he gave her was pure hatred. You said you had the rights. You said the deed was clear. I thought. Brenda stammered. Rick turned back to me. He pulled out a checkbook. 500,000. And we get a permanent easement. Ironclad. And, I added, I want a signed agreement from the HOA. No fines. No citations. For life. I could paint my house neon pink and park a tank in the driveway, and you can't say a word. Rick looked at Brenda. Sign it, or I sue the HOA for fraud. Brenda signed. Her hand was shaking so hard, she ripped the paper. I walked out of that office with a check for $500,000 in my pocket. I sat in my car and just stared at it. It was more money than I'd ever seen. It was our mortgage. It was our retirement. It was freedom. But the story doesn't end there. See, we paid off the house. We fixed it up. We went on a vacation to Italy. And for 5 years, we lived like kings in Silver Creek Meadows. Brenda was voted out at the next election. Turns out costing the neighborhood legal fees and humiliating the developer isn't a great platform. The new board was terrified of me. I was the guy who beat the system. Life was good. But then, about 6 months ago, my phone rang. It was Tom, my neighbor. "Mark," he said, sounding excited. "You're not going to believe this. A commercial developer just contacted us. They want to buy the whole back row." "What?" "Yeah. The strip mall down the road wants to expand. They want to buy the garden villas, the ones behind us, and the land our houses sit on to build a high-end lifestyle center. Shops, condos, the works." I chuckled. Good luck to them. "Those villas are brand new. They're offering double market value," Tom said. "They want to bulldoze everything and start fresh. But there's a catch." "What's the catch?" "They need your land. Specifically, they need that 30-foot strip you fought for. It's the only access point for the utility lines they need to run." I hung up and called the developer. Her name was Lisa. We met for coffee. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "we know your history with the property. We know you have an easement with the current HOA. But we need to buy the land outright to rezone. We're prepared to offer you fair market value." I looked at the plans. It was a massive project. Millions of dollars. "Lisa," I said, "I'm not interested in selling. I like my house." "Everyone has a price," she said. "I don't want a price," I said. "I want an investment." I pitched her an idea. I told her I'd sell the land and my house if they gave me a percentage. Not a flat fee. A percentage of the commercial lease profits from the shopping center. In perpetuity. She laughed at first, but I held the cards. Without my land, they couldn't run the sewer main. Without the sewer main, no shopping center. We negotiated for 3 weeks. In the end, we sold the house for 3 times what we paid for it. But the kicker? We get 0.5% of the net profit from the Silver Creek Plaza for the next 20 years. We moved out last month. We bought a place in the country, 50 acres, no neighbors, no HOA. Just trees and sky. As for Brenda, I heard she moved to a condo across town. Rumor has it she's already running for the board there, measuring people's doormats. Some people never learn. But me? I learned a valuable lesson. They tell you not to sweat the small stuff. They tell you to be a good neighbor, to go along to get along. But sometimes, when someone draws a line in the sand and tells you it's theirs, you have to grab a shovel and dig in. Because sometimes, that dirt is worth its weight in gold. And every month, when that check from the shopping center hits my account, passive income paying for my fishing trips and my grandkids' college, I pour a little extra creamer in my coffee and I toast to Brenda. Because if she hadn't been such a greedy, controlling tyrant, I'd still be working 9 to 5 to pay a mortgage on a house with a beige mailbox. Thanks, Brenda. Couldn't have done it without you. So, folks, here's the question. If you were in my shoes, would you have taken the first settlement? Or would you have burned the bridge to light the way? Let me know in the comments. And remember, check your deeds. You never know what you might own. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.